Hi, I'm Amy, and this is A Star Reads, and it's time for a Sunday sum up. So, how was this past week? Not much better than the weeks before. In fact, in some ways it was worse. So, I think we're just gonna move on. But I'll just say it was very emotional. I struggled with some things, and it wasn't a very happy week. But that's okay, because I did end up getting some reading done. I have 2 books, and actually 2 movies that I'm gonna review for you in this video. Plus I have a very small haul that I wanna share with you. And I'll start with the book, because when I walk home from school to my car, I usually pass a little free library. And there's someone who lives in that neighborhood who gets Book of the Month books, because every once in a while, there's some new Book of the Month books in there. And one that I saw in there that I've been interested in is Love and Other Disasters by Anita Kelly. So this is a cooking show romance, which are always fun. One of our characters is non-binary in this, so it's got some representation. It sounds like an interesting, fun story, and I've seen a couple people reading this. So that was a really fun find, and I have quite a few books to put in that little free library to make up for taking a couple from there that I've taken before. And the other thing that I got is actually not a book, but it is very bookish. And this was a gift from my wonderful friend Teresa and her husband Ross. They are beautiful people. They got one for Mom, so Mom has her own, and they got one for me because my birthday is coming up. Mom's birthday just happened. And we got these sweaters that say Booktrovert, because we're booktroverts. We've become even more booktroverts ever since COVID, especially. What better way to spend your time than reading? And I love this, it's so cute. It looks really good on because it's just a big cozy sweater. Mine is a navy blue and Mom's is like an oatmeal cover. And there goes my cat running across the street into Nom's yard. He's gonna get food. One of our neighbors puts out food for the stray cats and our cat thinks he's a stray cat. Thank you so much, Teresa and Ross. I love it. And I can't wait to get a lot of wear out of this, especially while I'm reading books and being a booktrovert. Okay, so let's talk about Finlay Donovan is Killing It by Elle Cosimano. This was the book for the January Shelf This Book Club choice. And it was my choice because Bailey from Ms. Bailey Reading asked me to choose. I was excited because this is one that I've had a lot of FOMO about. I was curious. I liked the premise. It sounded fun. And that's exactly what it was. So I ended up giving this book 4 stars. And universally within our book club group, almost everybody, not everybody, but almost everybody gave it 4 stars as well. There were definitely elements to it that we struggled with and didn't necessarily like, especially Finlay in the beginning. And for a good portion of the book, she's quite a mess. And she's also not the best mother figure. At least she's not presented as the best mother figure. And so it was really difficult to kind of get on board with Finlay as our main character. But a lot of the other characters were a lot of fun. Vero is a fantastic supporting character. She's also kind of the comedic relief, and I really enjoyed having her within the story. And I think that she was able to pull out some of Finlay's personality that we didn't find in the very beginning. That makes it so we appreciate and like Finlay more as the story goes. And then you've got your male characters, Stephen, Finlay's ex-husband, and then the love interests, the triangle of Julian and Nick. So the premise of this story, if you haven't heard, is that Finlay is a writer, and she is struggling because she's going through a divorce, and she has not been meeting her deadlines for the books that she's writing. And then she goes to meet her agent, her book agent, at a Panera Bread. And while she's there, they're talking about this mystery story that she's creating. But they're talking about it in a way that the person who's sitting next to them, this older woman, misinterprets what they're saying and thinks that Finlay is actually a hit woman. And so she hires Finlay to kill her husband. And through many events that happen, there's a lot of like bumbling that happens within this story, Finlay takes this job in a sense. So we're following Finlay as she's trying to bumble her way through being a hit person and what that means, as well as trying to maintain custody of her children, deal with trying to get her life back together. And it really took me a while to get into this because I was really frustrated with Finlay as a character. And there's definitely so many elements of this that are completely unbelievable. I think it is very important to suspend disbelief when you go into this book because it's not meant to be taken seriously. It really isn't meant to be taken seriously. And if you think that you're looking for all the plot holes and the things that will make it not the best murder mystery, you're going to find them. And then you may be disappointed because it's not a serious story. It's meant to be fun and funny. And it really does become
very fun and funny. And I did start liking Finlay as we went along. I mean, she's still not my favorite person, but I started liking her more as a character. And this just got more and more fun and ridiculous, and I ended up really enjoying it. It was so much fun. So it did end up being a 4-star for me. The writing is incredibly accessible, maybe too accessible, but I did find it fun, and there was a lot of humor that was mixed in with this that it ended up being funny. Like, I did giggle quite a few times in this. And they did a great job of hooking you into wanting to read the next one at the very end of this. So I see myself reading the next one. I don't know when, because you know how I am at continuing series. But I do see continuing this, and I'm excited about it. So I look forward to seeing what happens with the next one. If you're looking for a fun mystery, not necessarily the most realistic one, I recommend checking out Finlay Donovan's Killing It. Looks like we weren't done with the snow. What bloody idiot doesn't buy a saw? Neighbors let their dogs piss in my forest again. Bloody hell, they're driving through the forest again. How hard is it to read signs? You don't drive through the forest.
Okay, so let's talk about A Man Called Ove by Fredrik Backman. So I was nervous about this book. I picked it up because I want to watch A Man Called Otto, and I will include a review of A Man Called Otto at the end of this because I am planning on watching that this week, because I want to make sure that having read it, I go watch the movie that I'm very excited about. The reason I was nervous about this was because when I first started it, I was not sure about the writing style. And I don't know if this writing style that Fredrik Backman used within this book was unique to his writing style in general, or if it was unique to this story and how he wanted to portray Ove. I'm not sure, because I haven't read anything else by Fredrik Backman. But when I first started this, I was kind of turned off by it. I wasn't sure I liked it at all. I wasn't sure I was going to get into it, and that was a problem. Plus, I wasn't connecting to the characters. I wasn't connecting to Ove. I wasn't connecting to the other characters in the story. So I was really worried that it just wasn't going to be a hit for me. And I should say that I did start this at a time when I was slumping. And so even though I did end up reading a lot of books in January, I felt like they weren't getting my full attention. And the reason that's important is because I don't know if my issues with the beginning of this story was because of that, or if it was because they were genuine feelings that I didn't care for the writing as much at the beginning, or wasn't sure if I would get into it, and I wasn't creating connections. And I sat on it for a while. I sat on it like at page 130 or something for a couple of weeks. And then I picked it up and was just reading little bits here and there. I started really liking Ove, and I started really liking the other characters as well. The writing style grew on me. And it was surprising my shift because I didn't think I would end up loving it as much as I did end up loving it. You know, I figured, okay, I'm gonna like it more than I liked to begin with, but I really ended up loving it. I'm gonna give this book 4.5 stars. It had me in tears so many times. I absolutely fell in love with Ove, and even though he never ends up being a different person, he never ends up being a different character, he doesn't change who he is. Your perspective of him changes quite a bit, and you start accepting the parts of him as a person that you didn't necessarily see before because you only saw those prickly parts before. And the writing style did grow on me, and I do see how effective it is. I'd be interested to see what I think about other Fredrik Backman books. In fact, I have at least one more, so I will be reading more Fredrik Backman. I'm curious if that's his style or if it was just the intention behind this book in portraying Ove. So this ultimately is a story of grief and love. Our character Ove is a very difficult person because he's very stuck in his ways. He's very angry at a lot of things, and a lot of situations have happened throughout his life that have made him a very angry person, and he doesn't know how to handle that anger, so he takes it out on the people around him. Not necessarily intentionally, it's just the way he deals with things. And so we're getting to know this curmudgeon-y old man. We're getting to know what his life was like, his love was like within his life, and how he's planning on living the rest of his life after trauma has hit him. And so I think the beauty of this is looking at different perspectives and seeing things from a different perspective. A lot of people in Uve's life only see him as this grumpy old man who's causing them problems. But there's a lot more behind the scenes. There's a lot more that we don't know about him that is contributing to the way he's behaving. And he isn't what everybody
thinks he is just on the surface. You know, there's a lot more to him. I love when an author can change my perspective. I love when an author can make me look harder and think differently and try to be open to something different. But that was hard at first because I really had a hard time thinking, how am I going to like this character who I don't like? I don't see how he's going to grow on me. Whereas in other books that I've read about grumpy older characters or grumpy characters in general, you can kind of see like, oh, okay, I can see how they could be likable. And that doesn't feel like it's the case in the beginning of this. And so that made the outcome feel like so much more of a reward. And I think that's why I would rate it 4.5 stars. And I really did end up enjoying it. And I cried a lot. And I could see on a reread of this, maybe at a better time when I'm in a better headspace, probably giving this one a 5 stars because it really was that good. And I cannot wait to watch the movie. So let's go over to me after having watched the movie. Okay, so last night, Mom and I went to the movies, and that was really fun because we went to dinner first and had some sushi, and then we went and saw A Man Called Otto, which I'm very excited we went out and did because I feel like lately, not that I haven't gone out and done things, but it feels like it's a lot harder to get myself out doing things than it used to be. And so it was really nice to go have dinner, go watch a movie, and it was fantastic. Like, it was really good. And I did enjoy the movie a lot. I thought that Tom Hanks did an amazing job. He was a very good Otto. He wasn't quite Ove because Ove is much more of a curmudgeon, and as the story goes along, your opinions of him change, but his personality doesn't quite change that much. In this one, I feel like Otto does soften a bit as the story goes along. I guess just Tom Hanks can't be quite as mean as Ove can. Or he just didn't want to portray this character as quite as mean as Ove was. I did like the other characters. I felt like they represented the roles fairly well. We didn't get quite as much of a backstory for almost all the characters in the movie, but that makes sense because you're trying to take a book and condense it down to a movie. You can't include everything. And the only issue with that, as far as enjoyment level, is that knowing the back history of all these characters makes you feel even more tender towards them. So in this movie, it's not that you didn't feel tender towards the characters, because I think you did, but you didn't quite get as strong of a connection as you end up having for the characters and the side characters in A Man Called Ove. But I think that's just a matter of lack of time and what their focus was for the movie. You know, everybody has an idea of what they want to do when they're creating cinematography, when they're taking a book and making it appropriate for the big screen. That being said, the story was well preserved. I felt like it was well represented, and it was just interesting that it was done within the United States and that we have all these cultural components that were changed from the book to make it seem more realistic that it was within the United States. I thought that was pretty cool. Hey, it's Editing Amy. So I wanted to point out that there is a 2015 movie, it's a Swedish movie, of A Man Called Ove, and it looks fantastic. I was watching the trailer and it looks like it's on Netflix, so I'm gonna see if I can watch it tonight, but I won't be including a review of that in this video because I wouldn't be able to get this video out in time. But I just want to point that out there, that there is the original movie based off the book, and it looks like it was probably just as good, if not better, than the movie that I just saw yesterday. I cried, maybe not quite as much as with the book, but you definitely cry. And some of the scenes that I think were pretty important in the book, some of these big emotional scenes with Ove and some of the things that happen, those were pretty well maintained within the movie. So I'm glad that we kept some of those big scenes. There were a couple of scenes that I think that it would have been nice to have had them because it would have made us feel a little more sympathetic towards the side characters. And I think that the story overall is really a found family story. It's a found family story, and I didn't get that quite as much in the movie as you get in the book. So there may have been some choices made by the director where I would have rather gone a little bit more in this direction, maybe a little bit less in this direction, and we would have gotten a little more of that found family vibe. Trigger warnings for suicide for this movie and for the book because it is very heavily the subject matter of this story, and that's not spoilery. You find that out from the very beginning. And so it's not fun necessarily, but it was just fun to be able to get out and do something different. Well, I ended up going and checking, and A Man Called Ove, the 2015 version of the movie, is not on Netflix. It's actually on Amazon Prime. And then I proceeded to watch it for the past few hours. So now I'm scrambling to get this video edited so I can get it up for you. But I figured this would be a good time to talk a little bit about this movie and my thoughts. So it was good. It was really good, and I would compare it to the movie Man Called Otto very closely, actually. So the big differences are obviously that Man Called Ove, the movie, is Swedish, and it is a lot more close to the book in like
the casting, the characters, the type of characters. So that's very similar. What I thought was really interesting was that the screenplay for A Man Called Ove, the movie, is very similar to the screenplay for A Man Called Otto. So it almost seems to me like the directors and the screenwriters for A Man Called Otto were like, oh my gosh, we really love that movie, A Man Called Ove, and kind of took that and went with it, as opposed to really focusing on the book, because a lot of the things that I thought that the directors changed or wanted to change in the movie A Man Called Ove from the book were exactly the same as the movie A Man Called Otto. So that was kind of curious because they're both very heavily based off the book, but I almost felt like A Man Called Ove, the movie, was based off the book, and A Man Called Otto, the movie, was based off the movie A Man Called Ove. It's interesting to think about these two movies because they were so similar, so you didn't get too much difference between these two movies, whereas you do get a bit of differences from what they're like compared to the book. When it comes to the actual character Ove in the movie, he's a lot less mean and curmudgeonly as the character in the book. And what I realized, one of the things that both movies did was that they took the elements of Uve's personality in the book that are very politically incorrect. Like, he says a lot of things that are really inappropriate. And it's not necessarily because he's intending to be inappropriate. He's just like, well, I'm just asking these questions. What's wrong with asking questions? How am I ever going to learn? He uses terminology that is very problematic. And they didn't use that. They didn't bring that into either of the movies. So I thought that was an interesting choice and probably a wise choice. But that choice actually made Ove, the character in the movies, a lot more likable than he was in the book. And then in both instances, in the end, he's a lot more pleasant than he ever becomes in the book. So in the book, like I said, your opinion of him changes. His character doesn't actually change that much at the end. He's still curmudgeon-y. He's still grumpy. He still growls at people. He still yells at people. He still says inappropriate things. It's just that you have a very different opinion of him at that point, so you're willing to forgive more about him. So I thought that was interesting because both actors decided to portray him a lot less grumpy overall. At least he progresses into less of a grumpy person. In the movie A Man Called Ove, they do bring a lot more of his background history into this movie versus A Man Called Otto. And I did like that because it gives you a little more information about him so that you could understand him a little bit more and understand the stories that came along with his decisions a little bit better. And they do a lot more of that in the book than they do in either of the movies. But they left a lot of that out in A Man Called Otto. As far as the side characters, I felt like in the 2015 version, the movie, that was the least amount of information you get on the side characters. Whereas in A Man Called Otto, granted their stories are slightly different and they've changed the characters to work more within the US culture, but you get a little bit more about the characters. And that was kind of one of the things I really loved about the book. I loved that found family aspect, like I said. So in this movie, the 2015 version, it kind of gets lost a little bit. And maybe that's what makes it a little less, I don't know, I didn't cry as much in this one as I did for the book and even for A Man Called Otto. So that's something to think about. That's definitely a bit different. But overall, I really enjoyed this experience. I enjoyed getting to watch both movies and read the book this past week. I've had a very Uwe-filled week, and I think that maybe it's helped me with my inner curmudgeon, and hopefully I can let that go and go on into this next week feeling pretty positive. Okay, so if I look a little red, it's because I just got back from the gym. I don't think that's very effective.
Oh, yes!
Watch out for that tree!
What's the tree?
But I wanted to tell you about Cleo from 5 to 7, which is the movie that we chose. I think it was movie 300 and, what did I say before? 339 or something along those lines. It's a French Nouveau film, 1960-something, directed by Agnes Varda. It's kind of a slice of life film. I think French New Wave came around and it was more about the actual shots and the way things are set up are meant to like increase your tension or make you feel sad. And you can feel these feelings along with the people within the story, even though they're not necessarily telling you, oh, I'm so sad, or you know, like the story is not very explicit. And for me, it was okay. I didn't love it. It wasn't horrible. I didn't like her, and I think that made a big difference for my enjoyment of it, because I didn't feel a lot of sympathy for her when you were meant to feel sympathy or understand her feelings in the moments that she was feeling certain feelings. Maybe that was not the intention, but that was what I felt that the intention of the movie was, and it didn't work for me. And because the subtitles were so quick, I spent a lot of time trying to read the subtitles, and really this movie was all about the scenery and the film shots and how the director decided to go about filming to create a story. And I think that I could stand to watch this movie again and not really pay attention to the subtitles and see if I appreciated even more not really paying attention to what's being said, because that wasn't as important as what's being done on the camera. And so that was maybe my biggest problem here, was I was really trying to pay attention to the dialogue, and the dialogue wasn't as important as the cinematography. It's a me problem, because I know that this is a very highly rated movie. Lots of people love it, and it's like the second best female directed movie of all time or something, based on some list. I'll probably watch some other French New Wave and see if other versions of French New Wave are for me, or maybe this is just not a style that I particularly enjoy.
As far as the progress I've made in my reading this week, I have made it to page 39 in Works and Days in Theogony. So this is the one I'm kind of actively working on right now, because I'm hoping to get it done soon. That's why. And then the other one is Love in the Time of Cholera. I did make it to the end of chapter 3. And now I have this chapter to work on over this next week. So that's the other one I'm actively working on. And in my audiobook, I think I'm like 22% of the way through that one. We'll see how this next week goes. Hopefully it'll go a little better and I'm able to let go of some of that emotional stuff. Let me know in the comment section down below how you're feeling about your February reading so far. I had a funny spurt of energy right at the end of January, and this week, it hasn't been there. So I'm hoping that a spurt of energy comes back for the rest of February. But I'd love to hear how your February is going. If you've already finished a book in February, let me know what it was and how you felt about it. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe so you can see what happens next week in my life, my bookish life, and I will talk to you later. Thank you.